Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, Kemptown Branch. And since I just finished reviewing everything that's in the Bachmann and Scale Thomas range, at least everything that's out so far, I thought it would be kind of fun to sort of predict what the next few years of the range could look like. And obviously, I don't have any like insider information or anything. I have no idea what might happen, but I thought it would be fun to speculate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to predict what I think the next probably 6 new tooling uh, locomotives would be, as well as the next like new tooling items of rolling stock. So obviously, like since we're going to be predicting things, we're going to need to be able to look back at the history of the range so far. And without further ado, let's get into it. So far in the as far as locomotives go, we have 11 that have been announced and 6 that are currently released. Um, so far, like we have 9 unique characters and 8 unique locomotive toolings, plus 2 repaints. So here you can see like obviously the 8 toolings are Thomas, Percy, James, Toby, Emily, Gordon, Diesel, and Henry. And then as far as unique characters go, we add Paxton in. And then obviously there's the repaints of Thomas and James as well. And then for rolling stock, we also have 8 unique toolings. Or I guess 9 since the express brake coach would technically be different. But I mean, we have 8 like big tooling projects that have been done. So obviously we started out with Annie and Clarabelle and the troublesome trucks. And then they added the tankers, Emily's coaches, Toad, Henrietta, the ventilated van, and the express coaches. And all of this was done like just within the first 7 years of the range, which like looking back at it, and that's kind of it's kind of crazy to think that we actually got this much stuff within 7 years. But it's also really nice because it shows that Bachmann's pretty serious about the end scale range so far. So now that we've looked at the range, let's get into my prediction for the locomotives. And so first, these aren't actually my predictions, but I have seen a lot of people kind of suggest these as like the next uh, locomotives that Bachmann should make. And I agree in some cases. However, I'm not sure that they would do all of these like season 1 and 2 characters like immediately, just because when Bachmann started their HO range, like we got other characters like sprinkled in between them, like Spencer, Salty, Mavis, and like Ari and Bert, just to name a few. But um, these are kind of the main 6 predictions I see. So obviously Edward, Duck, Oliver, Donald and Douglas, and Daisy. However, my issue with this kind of is that if we do get all of these characters, that would kind of leave Edward as like the only locomotive that would have been announced in like 11 announcements that's not black or green, and I'm not really sure that Bachmann would go for that. And in addition to that, that would leave Paxton and Emily as the only characters like outside of the first like 3 seasons of the show that that would have been made. So I don't think these will necessarily happen. So on to my predictions. Obviously Edward's still in here because I mean he's been around since the very beginning. He was the character that started like the entire franchise, at least as far as like the stories go. He was a very prominent character through most of the TV series and was part of the main cast for a lot of the show. And in addition, he's also had quite a few toy variants within like the staple toy lines the last few years. And I don't really see any reason to believe that he would not also get made in N scale by Bachmann, especially since his HO model is also like as popular as it is. And then my next prediction is Duck. And I know you might be wondering if my list here is actually different from what I just showed you, and I promise it is. This is the only other character that was on that list that I'm putting in here. So I guess I just spoiled a little bit, but sorry about that. But I think Duck has a really good shot of being made, because obviously he was a very prominent character once he was brought back into CGI, and he's also been featured in quite a few of the toy lines the last couple of years. And in addition to that, I think he would make a good addition. I think he would go well with Toad, and I mean, obviously he's one of the 8 famous engines as well. So it's like I thought about putting Oliver here just because Toad has been made, but I feel like Duck would be just a little bit more iconic, like as far as characters go, and so I think he'd probably be the first Great Western engine they make. And then moving on to my next pick, I think that Rosie actually has a pretty good chance of being made fairly early on within the range, because obviously she's appeared a fair bit since they repainted her into her red livery for season 21, and they are pushing her pretty hard as a main character for this new show. And in addition to that, she's had quite a few toys since she's been made, since she was turned red, and she's also gotten a fair few variants throughout the toy ranges as well, like that are special variants, like the animal park themed ones. But yeah, I think Rosie, another thing is I think her Bachmann model is very popular, at least with everybody who doesn't hate Rosie as a character. But I think for everybody who I've seen that has bought a Bachmann Rosie, I feel like everybody has said that she's a really good model. And, I think that she has a fair chance of being made in N scale because of that as well. And so my next pick is going to be Mavis. And I think she's probably my weakest pick out of the characters that I have on this list. Just because, even though she was fairly prominent in the show, early on and then throughout the hit era and early CGI era, she did kind of fall out of use quite a bit towards the end, and she wasn't really seen very often. And in addition to that, with the exception of her 2026 toy, her last toys within the main ranges were made in 2013 and 2014. And obviously it's been a long time since her Bachmann model is made as well, and she was one of the first characters in the range. So I think that might have had a hand in why she was made in the Bachmann range. And so even though I'd love to see her in N scale, because I feel like she'd go well with Thomas, Percy, and Toby, since she also worked on the Farquhar branch, I definitely think she's probably the weakest on this list as far as who I think is going to be made. But I included her anyways just because she is a pretty unique diesel tooling, and I think that having some more diesels other than just the Class 08s would be a good thing. And moving on, my next character is Salty, and I think he has a pretty good shot of being made because obviously he's been a pretty prominent character throughout I think pretty much every version of the show, and he's obviously pretty unique in that he works at the docks and talks like a pirate, and he has had quite a few toys in the last few years. And in addition to that, obviously again he has a Bachmann model, and even though that was discontinued for a while, they are bringing it back, and I feel like Salty is a pretty recognizable character, and I think that he has a pretty good shot of being made in N scale. And then moving on, my next character in this slide is actually going to be an honorable mention rather than what my next prediction is. But I feel like Daisy has a chance of being made just because obviously her Bachmann model is fairly popular and she appeared a lot in the CGI series after she returned, so she was pretty popular there as well. However, she never really got very many toys, and obviously the only merchandise that was made of her since her return was her Bachmann model. And so far, it doesn't really seem like there's any news of her returning in the 2026 series as well. So, while I think she would be cool, my prediction for this final slot is actually going to be Spencer. And I think that he has a pretty good chance of being made because he's obviously been a very popular character throughout the show. He appeared a lot like throughout the hit era, throughout CGI. Uh, it has been a while since he last appeared, but uh, I think he is set to return in the 2026 series at some point. And obviously, he had quite a bit of merchandise made of him throughout the years, as well as getting like special variants as well. And he is a unique color, being like a silvery color as well. And he'd be another big engine in the range as well, which would be nice to see. And so I think Spencer has a pretty decent chance of being made. Although I do think that the other characters that I mentioned in the list are probably a little bit more likely. And obviously, you can see, like, with that list made up, the locomotive distribution is looking a lot more colorful here. Obviously, you get like quite a few more diesels in the range, and with Rosie and Mavis here, that means we'll have more female characters than just Emily, and I feel like this is a pretty good spread of like big and small characters, diesels and steamies, and male and female characters, and then the color selection is pretty varied as well. So obviously, here's what the range would look like if they were announced. As far as recolors go, I could see them announcing a few in between. I think the most likely one would be Sydney, just because he has an HO model now, and I feel like he would go well with Paxton. And obviously, other recolors they could do would be like Ari and Bert, and then Pink Rosie and Busy Bee James. Although I think that like Pink Rosie and Busy Bee James have a lower priority as far as recolors go, at least in my opinion, just because they haven't really been relevant for the last few years, and I feel like if we got them before like other characters that like are in Bachmann's HO skill range, it would just kind of feel lazy, I guess. But yeah, moving on to the rolling stock. Um, I like obviously we've gotten the three main pieces of rolling stock, such as the plank wagon, the tanker, and the ventilated van. And I have seen some people express that they think that these will be the only like freight rolling stock we get in the range, and I hope that that's not the case. I mean, obviously that's because that's kind of all we got with large scale, but I am hoping that since N scale is a smaller range and it'd be easier to make new toolings for it than it would be for large scale, I hope that we get more. And obviously, like, one thing I have seen is like a lot of people have said that like a lot of the toolings in HO that they've done that they haven't done yet for N scale, like only have a few like color variants. However, I think that shouldn't necessarily be a turnoff because some of these variants were in the range for quite a while before they got any variants, and obviously Bachmann felt that there was enough of a justification to make them despite that. So obviously I think that there will be more rolling stock announced, and my first guess for that is going to be the brake van. And obviously I remember a lot of like there was a faceless brake van announced earlier in the range, and that was based on like the LMS 2021 brake van, like the orange one that was seen quite frequently in the CGI series, and obviously that got cancelled. But I remember when that was announced, a lot of people were kind of expressing like disappointment that that was the version that was announced instead of the standard brake van, kind of like this. And I have to say I agree. I think that like since it's been made in HO and large scale, it would be really nice to get this in N scale, especially since the only brake van we have right now is Toad. And obviously they could use this tooling to make the spiteful brake van as well. But I think like just getting more brake vans in general would be good for the range, especially with where we're at this point. And then my next prediction for rolling stock is going to be the red coaches. And I debated on whether just calling these repaints or like having these be a new tooling project, but obviously since the brake coach would have some necessary changes to be made, I decided to put them as a new tooling. And obviously these coaches have been seen quite a lot throughout the series, just from like season 2 all the way to the end of the show. They were pulled by several characters, so there'd be no issue with finding characters to pull these, and they'd they'd go pretty well with pretty much every character that's in the range so far, with the exception of maybe like Diesel and Paxton. But obviously, if they make these, they'd be able to repaint them to be Toby's museum coaches in the future as well. So there is recolor potential there as well. And then my next tooling choice is probably going to be a little weird, but I'm choosing the tanker. And I know we already have a tanker in the range. However, it's based on the Graham Farish tooling and it's not necessarily accurate to the show. And in addition to that, the Graham Farish tanker tooling is like the most expensive piece of rolling stock, of like freight rolling stock in the range. And, you know, obviously they like canceled the LMS style brake van because they felt that that Graham Farish tooling would be too expensive to justify. And considering the fact that the tankers are the only freight stock that we haven't seen any recolors of since their announcement, I'm not 100% sure that those would be recolored at all. So I'm kind of wondering if we'll get like a situation similar to the narrow gauge box vans, where we get like a new tooling for any future products that looks closer to the ones in the show, and would probably also be just a little bit cheaper as well. So obviously I kind of chose the large scale tanker to represent them, since I feel like it looks just that little bit better than the HO tooling. But as far as like tanker variants that we could see if they do go this route, I think the milk tanker, possibly the soda fuel tanker as like a redo of the original fuel tanker, would be fairly possible. The tar tanker is very popular, and obviously that just returned to the HO range, and I believe it's still being made in large scale, so I could see that happening. The raspberry syrup and cream tankers have been made in both ranges, so I could see those happening. And then as far as other tanker toolings or tanker variants that I could see happening, since the water tanker was already done in N scale, I could see them doing the chocolate syrup tanker just to go with like the Mr. Jolly's Chocolate Factory van as well, if they do like a bunch of recolors for these. And then moving on, I think that the mail coach has a fairly good chance of being made in the N scale range, because obviously it's a very popular item of rolling stock in the HO scale range, and it looks just like it has in the show for the last several years. Obviously there are repaints in the HO scale range that they could draw from if they need repaint options. So like the live lobster tooling, and then the green van. Obviously I think, well, one thing that I think is that they could do like the livery that was seen on Henry's Flying Kipper vans throughout the CGI series instead of the green mail van tooling, and they could call it like Flying Kipper van. And I feel like that would go pretty well with Henry, obviously. And even though in the CGI series this van was a slightly different like render than the regular mail van, I could see them just using like the mail van that they make to do this tooling, because they kind of did that with the sort of cream and red livery for the live lobster van. And so I think my guesses for like what the three variants could be would be the mail coach, and then the live lobsters van, and then the Flying Kipper van. And I think that the mail coach and flying kipper van in general would be pretty safe bets, since they were seen like in multiple, since any trains that had them in had like multiples of them in the same train. So I feel like people would probably buy 2 or 3 of each of them. But yeah, anyway, moving on to the next tooling, I could see the flat wagon getting made in N scale, and obviously there have been 3 variants made, like the diesel drum flatbed, the flatbed with paint drums, and then the logging company flatbed. And I think that these have a fairly okay chance. Like if we get the mail van, especially since like the bogies for the mail van are the same as the bogies for the flat wagons, they could easily reuse that and just make a new like body tooling to make these. I do think that these probably have a lower chance of being made than like the other stuff I've mentioned so far, just because they've kind of been few and far between in the range so far. But obviously, like I feel like each one that has been made has been fairly popular with collectors of Bachmann's HO range, and I would hope that the same would be true for the N scale range if they were made. And anyways, moving on, my last prediction for the new rolling stock toolings is one that's actually not in any of the ranges yet. However, since we got Henrietta and Hannah, and we were going to get the LMS brake van, I could see them doing like a unique tooling for the N scale range. And so these one plank wagons, or as they're called on the Wikipedia, stake bed wagons, have been seen quite a lot in the CGI series. Obviously, like they were in trains a lot just throughout the ARC era, and they've been seen in several colors like black, red, and green. They aren't necessarily like super prominent in the show, and I haven't really seen people ask for them in like the HO scale range, for example. But they have been seen like a lot throughout the CGI series, and I think that if they were made, it would be a case of like people buying them just because they are something that was seen quite a bit in the show, and they did have quite a variety of loads that they carried as well. So like I could see them being made empty, but I could also see Bachmann doing them with like a couple different load variants just to like make them more interesting. And then I do think that their livery choices did actually inspire products in the HO range. So like obviously these 3 wagons, which I believe are discontinued now, so maybe they weren't so popular. But like obviously the red, green, and then there's the gray one as well instead of it being black. But I do think that like these could possibly be unique and well thought out, just like items of rolling stock if they were made. But yeah, obviously time will tell. And then as far as recolors go, I think that we'll see recolors of models that have already been made in the range. So if they do decide not to do like and obviously some recolors are better than other recolors, as you can see, and I definitely think that some seem like a lot more like inspired as far as like instead of others. But as far as the open wagon tooling goes, I think we could see the coal wagon with load, because obviously the green plank wagon was seen quite a lot in the CGI series alongside the red one, and I know that the coal wagon is a very popular HO scale model, and it has survived all the way until now in the HO range, despite having like other coal wagon variants come after. And then additionally, I've seen a lot of people express interest in the Soto China Clays wagon, that has been announced for HO, so I could see it having a reasonable chance at being made in N scale as well. And then the cargo car, even though I don't think it's very popular, it has been made in both HO and large scale, and it survived in both ranges for a pretty long time. So I could see it happening in HO or N scale. And then another variant that I think could happen would be the Farquhar Quarry Wagon. However, I think we would need to see like how the HO scale wagon does before Bachmann announces this one, especially since it's another red wagon uh, with lettering on it. And then as far as box vans go, I'm hoping that they do like either the gray van or the troublesome van or both. Obviously, it's troublesome truck 7 in HO scale, but I think that like since the numbers really only like uh, feel necessary for the first 2 troublesome trucks, I could possibly see them ditching the numbers after those 2 and then just introducing troublesome truck 7 as maybe like troublesome van for the N scale range, or at least I definitely hope that they would do that. And then I could also see them doing the faceless gray van as well, since that was seen all the time throughout like the CGI series, especially like during the Brenner era of the show. And then I also think that the fun fair vans, so like the red and blue ones, have a fairly good chance of being made in N scale, considering that they have been pretty popular in HO scale and they were announced fairly recently for large scale. And then I believe the explosives van has also been a fairly popular choice in both HO and large scale, so I could see them doing that in N scale as well. And then as far as tankers, if they decide not to make a new tooling for them, and they decide just to like continue using the Graham Farish tooling, I could see them announcing more variants. And I think the most likely ones would be the milk tanker, the raspberry syrup tanker for some color variety, and then the tar tanker, since obviously the tar tanker is very popular, and then the milk tanker feels like it would be weird not to be in the range, considering they've made both variants in both HO and large scale now. Yeah, other than that, I could also see them doing the red express coaches, especially if the green express coaches end up being very like a popular choice for people collecting the N scale range, which I'm sure they will. But I could see them announcing these just to get another use out of that tooling. And with that, those are my predictions done. So again, just to like run through my predictions for new toolings. Obviously, I think Edward, Duck, Rosie, Mavis, Salty, and Spencer have a fairly good chance of being the next newly tooled locomotives in N scale. And then I think the brake van, red coaches, possibly the tankers, and then the mail van, the long flatbeds, and then the sort of one plank wagons have a fair shot at being made in N scale, since all of these are wagons that have been seen several times throughout the CGI series, and they've been pretty popular in Bachmann's HO range and the large scale range where applicable. And yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Let me know what your thoughts are for like what the future of the N scale range could be. Obviously, this isn't like a prediction for the upcoming announcement, just because I think that this covers a lot more ground than would be able to be announced within like the next couple of years. I think that if we did get all of these toolings, that would be over the next several years, probably through the 85th anniversary and maybe just a little bit beyond that. But I hope that Bachmann's able to make more N scale models for the Thomas range for years to come. Because obviously, like, it was disappointing when Tomix wasn't able to make more than 4 characters, and now that Bachmann has kind of picked up the range, it would definitely be really cool to see them expand like pretty far beyond the main cast. But yeah, I hope you found this video entertaining. It was definitely fun to kind of look through Bachmann's HO range at like everything that's been made so far, and to kind of pick through everything to see like what I think the most likely things would be for N scale. And obviously I would love to know you guys' opinions on like what you guys think could be next for the N scale range. And if you like this video and you want to see more, please like and subscribe. I'm definitely planning to continue making videos, and I hope you all have a great day. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you next time.